The University of Maryland has been working to clean up its sporting events after an incident a couple months ago in which rowdy fans used a vulgar chant to taunt an opposing team member. Well, now the university has obtained permission from the state's attorney general to restrict the use of vulgarities at its college sports games. So is the policy a violation of free speech? Joining us now to debate that is First Amendment attorney Lawrence Walters and sports legal analyst Robert Becker. Good to see both of you.
Good to see you.
All right, Rob, you're a smart attorney. You've heard of First Amendment rights before.
I have.
How the heck would you enforce this?
Well, you'd enforce it by having a list of certain words that cannot be used in certain kinds of sentences, and if somebody uses them, you escort them from the building, or perhaps you just say, you know what, you can't come in the next time
so
you want
what,
to come
you have
in.
10 language police per every 200 sports watchers?
Well, look, there's certain words that are particularly offensive. There's certain words that you and I know that we can't say on this program. Well, whatever those words are, you can take those same words, put them in a list, and say if someone says these loud at a sporting event, they're escorted out of the building.
Do you think this would really, Lawrence, do anything to reduce the kind of vulgar behavior we've seen at college campuses for years?
Not a chance. You know, I mean, how do you ever come up with an effective list? Either the list is going to be overbroad in that it's going to censor too much speech, and people are going to always come up with other words that can convey just as effectively whatever profanity they want to convey.
So do you think this is a joke?
Too vague. I don't know if it's a joke. I mean, people feel strongly about it, but the First Amendment rights involved are very serious, and if the government starts with censoring profanity at a football game, I'm very concerned about where that could lead and what kind of precedent that sets, frankly, from a First Amendment standpoint.
Where do you draw the line here, Rob?
Okay, first of all, you point out that this is property owned by the government. You have a rule that specifically applies to using curse words loudly in the presence of women and children. There are exceptions, and the exceptions are when you are trying to protect a certain group, you have a certain location. I mean, just as the FCC says, you know what, you can't use these words on television, this government here, Maryland, says you can't use it in our arena, and that's totally consistent. And remember, this is a school where you have this sort of idea of protecting children and students.
I get that. But Lawrence raised the issue of what is offensive to one person is not offensive to the other. And how are you going to come up with lists where you're going to satisfy half of these critics?
But wait a minute. The words you can't use on the show are not offensive to everyone, but it's still perfectly acceptable for the FCC to say you can't use the F word and the S word. You know, George Carlin's famous list of 7 words, the FCC can ban that.
This is not the public airwaves, though. We're dealing with a government-owned piece of property, which is a traditional public forum. We're not talking about public airwaves where there's a license to use them. That license can be revoked. We're talking about people in public, and people swear in public, frankly.
But there's a difference between public and a property that's owned by the government. I don't see any reason why they can't put a license on that and condition and say, you want to come into our building on campus, University of Maryland, you can't use these curse words. That doesn't raise the risk, sir, that the government will go out in a Central Park and say you can't curse in Central Park.
Well, if you want to use our sidewalk, then you're going to have to agree not to use these words. And if you want to walk into our city hall, you're going to have to agree to not say this. That's a very, very dangerous precedent, Rob.
No, you can draw the line at publicly owned property, particularly if you make it clear in the rule that you're protecting certain people who can't get up and leave in time to get out of the way of your loud noise, and that is perfectly acceptable.
Larry, do you think there's any compromise here that would curb the vulgarity and still allow people what they think is free expression at these games?
I think the approach has to be one of incentive and voluntariness. You know, that there should be certain incentives provided to students that comply, and give the students a challenge. Why don't you let them come up with a way that they can be convinced and incentivized?
I hear free beer coming to mind.
No, I don't have a problem with. No, I would agree with Lawrence that that's preferable. If we can get kids not to curse by incentivizing, I'm all for it. But the issue here in Maryland is, what if that doesn't work? And I think they do.
All right, gentlemen. We will watch the debate and see how this impacts college campuses across the country. Rob Becker, Lawrence Walters, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Paula.